It is the 30th millennium. So far above and yet so human stands the Primarchs. Crafted from the Emperor's own genetic material, they have been spread across the galaxy, scattered by the forces of chaos, knowingly or unknowingly awaiting the arrival of their father, the Emperor of mankind. Sanguinius, Perturabo, Corvus Corax. How did they meet the Emperor? Sanguinius had never seen a spaceship before, not outside the fractal impressions of them that had sailed in his waking dreams. This one, sitting on the desert plain with its golden armor, baking in the sun, had suggestions of vulturousness. It was a thing of power and efficiency, blunt and brutal. Fire made it fly, not any notion of grace. Figures clustered around the craft's landing legs, where the ship's great metal claws gripped the radiation-soaked dust of the wasteland. These men and women were plated in the same gold as the ship, rendered upon their bodies with painstaking artistry. My father's guardians, Sanguinius thought, and what a thought it was. Not only that a being such as his father required guardians, but that he had a father at all. All the years of wondering at his own heritage, devoid of insight into his origins, and here at last was the truth. Standing in the shadow of a vessel from the void, he leaned into the desert wind, stretching his muscles and rising on a thermal of bitter breeze. The temptation was there, like it always was, to soar, to break free of the ground and its responsibilities, taking to the sky and seeking distant lands, where the secrets of old wars lay buried. Today that urge was both stronger and weaker. His heart was ill at ease with what this meeting would mean, but nevertheless, he burned to know what lay ahead. He arced groundward, landing lightly with a scuff of his boots across the earth and a final furling of his wings. Dust swirled around his shins as he stepped forward. The golden figures carried weapons, a panoply of axes and spears, and hard-caliber firearms. Sanguinius carried only his sword, undrawn, riding low on his hip. "Welcome to Balfor, Outlanders," he spoke Enochian, the tongue of his people, the pure. He wondered if the Outlanders would understand him, or whether they would be forced to rely on hand gestures and awkward mimicry. "My son," said one of the Golden Ones, somehow speaking it silently. He felt his father's voice for the first time, as one of his own thoughts, a sensation rather than speech, backed by a tremendous feeling of suppressed force. The Golden Man, if he was a man, that sent the contact seemed to be making significant efforts to restrain himself, or to contain the power within himself. There was more there, though. My son rhymed with my weapon, and rhymed with my ninth, and rhymed with other concepts that Sanguinius couldn't pass from the core of the man's meaning. A lifetime of perspective was bound up in that contact, and Sanguinius sensed only the gulf between his father's silent words and the meaning behind them. But he felt no threat in the touch of mind upon mind, confidence, impatience, love, caution, approximations of those where words couldn't quite convey the actuality. It was all there. The man, and he did seem like a man, dark of skin and hair, smelling of metal and sweat, in possession of a heartbeat, walked closer. "I am the Emperor," the man said, as he stepped out from the spacecraft's shadow. "And I am your father." "Father," the man had said, the word rhyming in silence with master, with shaper, with creator. Sanguinius met the Emperor's eyes. What he saw there, glinting in the light of his father's gaze, was the answer to the question he had never even considered. This being, this Emperor, was human, but he was not exactly a man. "I see the light of many souls in your eyes, many men, many women," the Emperor smiled. "Is that what you see?" He spoke flawless Anakinaian, but that perfection was itself a flaw. He spoke the tongue with the same dialect and inflection as Sanguinius himself. Either the Emperor was pulling the meaning from the angel's mind, or imprinting meaning upon it. Whichever was true, he wasn't really speaking the language at all. Nor was Sanguinius entirely certain he could see the man's mouth move. "I have sought you for many years," said the Emperor, and behind those words, Sanguinius sensed the cheering of crowds and the burning of worlds. His blood ran cold in the desert heat. "I've seen shades of this meeting many times in my dreams," Sanguinius confessed. A heavier gust blew from the east. He instinctively lifted a wing to shield himself from the gritty air. The Emperor's eyes followed the movement. He began to circle Sanguinius in a slow walk, one gauntleted hand reaching out, fingertips running down the angel's feathers. Sanguinius's pale gaze tracked his circling father, but his wings rippled with discomfort each time the Emperor moved behind him, out of sight. "You are uneasy," said the Emperor. "That is natural, my son. I have come not only to liberate you from exile, but to ease your heart and mind with all you need to know." Sanguinius felt a lifetime of questions trapped on his tongue. There was one, however, that was always going to break free first. One question above all that plagued him and haunted his people. Since the tribe of pure blood had discovered him in the wild lands, they worshipped him for his strength and beneficence, but they feared him for the question that now lay unspoken between father and son. "Ask," said the Emperor. "Ask the question I sense lying upon your tongue." The angel pulled back from his father, not furling his wings but spreading them. With sudden passion he beat a fist against the animal hide on his breastplate. A lone feather, swan white, drifted in an arcing dance down to the dusty earth. "What am I?" "You are my son," said the Emperor. And again, meanings and concepts danced beneath those words. "You are my son" was overlaid by "you are a Primarch," and "you are my 9th general," and "you are a component of a great work," and "you were stolen by the enemy," and most unsettling of all, "you may have been changed by them." "I do not know what you mean." "You will," the Emperor assured him. "You are the death of faith," Sanguinius replied. "That I know." The Emperor regarded him before speaking. "Yes," his father agreed. "And also no." "How do you know of such things?" "I told you. I have dreamed of this day. Fragments, shadows, suggestions. Sometimes they come to me, fierce with emotion, yet rate clean of detail." "Faith is a weapon," said the Emperor. "A weapon that the species cannot be trusted to wield." "My people revere me as their god," Sanguinius replied. "That brings them a measure of peace. No doubt to you and your sky-sailing kind, we are nothing but primitives, roaches in this poisoned desert. But I reward their faith in me. I am their servant. I am mercy when my people need it most, and I am death to their enemies. That does not make you a god, my son. I never said I was a god. I said my people believe me to be one." Sanguinius stared into his father's inhuman, too human eyes. "My people, the pure, are to be left in peace. Whatever pact you and I swear this day, my inviolate condition is this: no ship will enter Balfor's heavens without my mandate, and no interference will be permitted to the clans of the pure blood without my permission. We have carved out the solace of peace here, together. You will not threaten it, father." The Emperor nodded, not in agreement, but in sudden understanding. "That is why you fear me, is it not? You fear the endangerment of what you have achieved here." "I speak of loyalty and love," the angel said gently. "And you speak of achievement. Am I wrong?" asked the Emperor. "I fear for the lives of my people, who deserve only peace. A peace we have fought so hard for. Behind your words, I hear the triumph of cultures that see you as their savior, but I also hear the razing of cities and the burning of worlds. I hear the dirges of faiths now forbidden, and the mourning of those nations that followed them. Am I wrong?" The Emperor said nothing. Later, many times over the decades to come, Sanguinius would think back on those words. For all the purity of the Emperor's intent, there were so many compromises. Faith could not be tolerated, except for when it could. Religions were drowned in the ashes of defiant worlds. Sanguinius asked then what no other Primarch had given voice to. Even Angron, upon his discovery, would act without asking the question Sanguinius asked now. What if I refuse? The Emperor seemed to weigh this. You will not refuse. I know your soul. Here you saved tens of thousands of lives. With me, you will save billions of lives on millions of worlds. You will save the lives of every human yet to be born, and that is not something you could turn your back on. They stared into each other's eyes, father and son, creator and created. Neither argued against the truth of the Emperor's words. I want something from you. I want your oath. The Emperor was silent, allowing his son to continue. Do you swear, on whatever oaths you hold value to you, that you will leave the clans of the purebloods in peace, untouched by your designs unless they desire otherwise, free to exist as they already exist, believing whatever they choose to believe? The Emperor hesitated. Sanguinius saw the calculation in his father's eyes, and he wondered, is he taken aback by the love I bear for my people, or is he merely considering alternate avenues around this obstacle in his great work? The Emperor finally spoke. You have my promise. Sanguinius closed his wings. Then let us speak of the future, Father. And so they did. This is such a fantastic scene as, after finally so long, Sanguinius has so many answers. He has dealt with this secret shame that when the Emperor or whatever creator was out there, they would see his wings, they would think something was wrong with him, like he was mutated in some way. And to know that he has this acceptance by the Emperor means so much to him. He also fears immensely for his people, the people who have saved him, the people who took him in when he was so young, and he has endured so much on this hellscape of Baal, and he understands that when the Emperor comes, it is a critical moment. There's only a before and after for this very grandiose entrance, because the Emperor has designs on the galaxy, and he fears that in the name of a compliance, in the name of conformity to this greater whole of this Imperium, the people of Baal would suffer immensely. But in a way, it is a dream. It is a unification of the entire species of mankind with terror at its heart, all led by this master of mankind, the Emperor. The gift of foresight possessed by both of these immensely powerful humans and men means that they both knew this was coming, but yet Sanguinius almost seems to realize that this is not a momentous and joyous occasion. This is a negotiation, and it's a moment of a great weight and a great responsibility placed upon his shoulders, because he's no longer, after this, the protector of just Baal. He is going to be the protector of the Imperium and the protector of humanity. The Emperor comes and he's assessing him, looking to see if he, Sanguinius, is worthy to join his side. Light spilled from within as a gangplank extended from the craft with a clank. A shadow appeared in the light, waiting for a moment at the entryway before emerging into view. Whispers spread through the men of surprise and amazement, guns quivering in shaking hands, and there were clatters as some of the soldiers dropped their weapons. Seemingly without prompt, the men lowered themselves to the ground, putting aside their weapons and bowing their heads. Some prostrated themselves, whispering fervently. Corvus glanced at Gaffington beside him. The lieutenant was on his knees too. There were tears in his eyes, an expression of joy etched on his slack-lipped face. "So majestic," Gaffian muttered. "What glory! What power!" Confused, Corvus directed his attention to the man descending the landing ramp. He seemed unremarkable. In fact, he seemed so unremarkable that Corvus could not discern a single distinguishing feature about him. He was of average height, with dark hair and moderately tanned skin. In build he was neither bulky nor slight, but of normal proportion, slightly larger than the malnourished men who now abased themselves before him. He was dressed in a robe of white linen, free of ornamentation except for a necklace of gold, which hung a pendant fashioned in the shape of an eagle with outspread wings, a lightning bolt in its claws. The man's eyes were as indistinct as the rest of him, neither blue nor green, nor grey nor brown, but a flexed mixture of all. Yet there was something in those eyes that reached into Corvus and touched upon his inner self. There was wisdom and kindness there, and antiquity that was very humbling, but also disconcerting. At the same time as Corvus saw this, he also witnessed the arrival of a demigod. Wreathed in golden light and dressed in white finery that burned with its own light, he saw a stern face set with two golden orbs for eyes, piercing in their intensity, searing into the core of his being. The stranger seemed to tower over the kneeling men, borne forward upon a carpet of undulating flames. It was impossible to reconcile the two images. The supreme, grandiose king of men approached Corvus, but all the while the slight, unimposing man flickered within. Finally, Corvus's mind could fight no longer against the glamour, and he saw the new arrival as his followers did, and was filled with an overwhelming urge to pay obedience to this stranger. He fought that instinct. He had waged a war so that his people would not bow before another man. The newcomer's effect on Corvus's men unsettled the rebel leader. He stared with narrowed eyes, unable to discern which image was true and which was illusion, as the stranger paced slowly and confidently across the ferrocrete. "Who are you?" Corvus demanded. "What have you done to my men?" The stranger looked around at the guerrilla fighters, regarding him with adoration, seeming to Corvus slightly nonplussed at the scene. His blonde hair fell in waves across his shoulders as he turned his head, spilling like fiery liquid. Another wave of majesty swept over Corvus, and again the guerrilla commander made a physical effort not to fall to his knees. "An occupational hazard," said the man, returning his attention to Corvus. He fixed the rebel leader with a stare, his eyes now permanently golden like bottomless wells of light. There was a glow of power beneath his skin, as if the stranger's flesh were embers masked behind thin paper. Corvus experienced a momentary fluttering in his breast, and a knot of anxiety in his gut, a fraction of the effect the man was having on his warriors. "I am the Emperor of mankind. I created you." Hearing these words was like a veil lifting from Corvus's eyes. He saw the Emperor as he had seen him before, watching the growing infant through the canopy in an incubator. His face had been distorted by the curves of plates of glass, but the features were unmistakable. The guerrilla leader had long pondered the face from his earliest memories, wondering to whom it belonged. Now vague recollections became sharp memory. Corvus recalled the noise and lights and booming voices that engulfed him, remembered the surge of power and disorientation as unnatural forces had borne him away from that place of his creation. Now he saw and knew for certain the face of his father, the only individual worthy of Corvus's unwavering obedience. He lowered himself to one knee in deference, understanding that the stranger spoke the truth. Here, was the master of mankind. "What do you call this place?" the Emperor asked. "It used to be called Lycaeus," Corvus replied. "Now we know it as Deliverance." "A good name," said the Emperor. "Please, rise, my son. We have much to talk about." And they did. Corvus withdrew from his men and took the Emperor to his quarters, an old guard station in the mid-levels of the Black Tower. Corvus sought out food and drink for his guest, ashamed at the meager fare he could offer his father. The Emperor waved away his concerns, sitting on the rough bunk that served as a chair for the massive rebel commander. "Do you recognize me?" the Emperor asked. His expression was hard to read, but Corvus thought he detected a hint of surprise behind the question. Whatever glamour had befallen the guerrillas had a lesser effect on Corvus, and the man before him was definitely the same from his old memories. "As if from a dream," he replied. "Interesting," said the Emperor, with a smile and a nod. They spoke about many things, though Corvus was bursting with questions about the Emperor, himself and the wider galaxy. He found that he did most of the talking, answering constant queries from the Emperor concerning what had taken place on Deliverance and Kievar. Corvus furnished him with all the information he could concerning the history of the star system and the war for freedom he had waged over recent years. Corvus paced the room while he spoke, animated and energized. The Emperor sat on the bunk and nodded occasionally, in understanding rather than approval. In fact, he showed no judgment of any kind, no condemnation or endorsement of Corvus's actions. He listened intensely to everything Corvus told him, sometimes asking exceptionally pertinent questions about the tiniest of details, wishing to absorb everything about Corvus's life. "But there is one piece missing that I cannot answer," Corvus said, finally voicing what in his heart he had yearned to know since his first discovery. "How is it I came to be here?" The Emperor's mood darkened, and his face grew grim. For the first time, he took a sip from the glass of water Corvus had given to him hours earlier, eyes haunted. "There is another universe," he said. "It lies alongside ours, part of it, but also separated. It is called the Warp." "I know of it," said Corvus, "though I have not seen it. I hear that ships can use it to travel distant stars. Some of the machines of Kievar are said to harness the energy of the Warp. It is a universe of boundless power, and can be accessed, as you say, by ships and by the minds of special men that we call Psychers," the Emperor continued. "Like our galaxy, the Warp is inhabited by creatures not of flesh, but thought. Sometimes they hunger for our material lives, wishing to feast on our mortality. You and your brothers were taken from me by denizens of the Warp before you were ready." "Brothers?" Corvus was excited by the prospect, pushing aside the questions that the Emperor's answers had prompted. Though he had had many friends amongst the prisoners of Lycaeus, always Corvus had been aware of his otherness, and when they had started to call him Savior, any hope of normal relationships had ended. That there were others like him filled Corvus with hope again. "Yes, you have brothers," said the Emperor, smiling at his son's delight. 17 of them. You are the Primarchs, my finest creations." 17? Corvus asked, confused. "I remember that I was number 19. How can that be so?" The Emperor's expression grew bleak, filled with deep sorrow. He looked away as he replied. "The other 2, he said. "That is a conversation for another day. Where are my brothers now? Are they with you? You and the other Primarchs were snatched from me by strange powers of the Warp, thrown across the galaxy on unnatural tides. That is how you came to rest beneath a glacier on this moon. Yes, I have seen what befell you, learning of your life the moment I laid eyes upon you. The rumor of you, of a magnificent being who led a rebellion here, has traveled farther than you realize, and it was word of this that attracted my attention. Your brothers, those I have found, were similarly scattered to far-flung worlds. Like you, they are all great warriors and leaders. That was my gift to you. You are supreme commanders, with intellect and physical ability unmatched by anything in the mass of humanity. I engineered you from my own genetic structure, to be my sons and my lieutenants in the Great Crusade. What is this crusade? How many of my brothers have you found? Most of them, replied the Emperor. I have vast armies, legiones astartes. As you are crafted from me, so they are crafted from you. The Primarchs are the generals of those armies, leading humanity's reconquest of the galaxy. The long night, the age of strife has ended. The remnant of old empires smolder out in the darkness, the dying coals of humanity almost smothered by the dark. The Great Crusade fans the flames into life, bringing with it reason to drive out superstition, enlightenment to replace barbarism. With your help, I will unite humanity and lead mankind to rule the stars. It was so much to take in, but Corvus knew it to be true. Not only the words of the Emperor seemed certain, the idea of what he described meshed with a much deeper feeling, knowing he was a Primarch, that he had been created to fight and to command, explained much that Corvus had never understood about himself, on a level that he understood in his spirit, and was encoded into every cell of his body. Corvus knew what he was. I swear my loyalty to you, said Corvus, sinking to one knee in front of the Emperor. He met the Emperor's gaze and felt elation, like no victory had given him before. I am your son, your Primarch, and your will shall be my command. That is good, said the Emperor. I have armies waiting for you. They are the Raven Guard, highly decorated and distinguished in my campaigns already. When you are ready, you will assume command of the Legion. Am I not ready now? Corvus said, having been elevated and then deflated by the Emperor's words. Not yet, my son, said the Emperor, but soon you will emerge to join your brothers, and take your place at my side at the head of the Raven Guard. First, though, tell me of Kievar. What are your intentions? To bring peace to both the world and its moon, to heal the wounds of the past, said Corvus. With your help, I will succeed. Peace is the hardest goal to achieve, said the Emperor. Victory, the cessation of war, the demilitarization of our opponents, these we can obtain with might of arms and perseverance. Peace, that is an altogether different beast. Corvus frowned, but nodded slowly. The Emperor sipped from his glass, his gaze unmoving. Tell me again, then. Tell me of the wounds you and your followers inflicted upon this world, and of the peace you would bring to it with my help. The moment comes where the questions to all the answers he has been hiding and suppressing deep down. It walks down that gangplank, and it is a being of incredible power, his father, the Emperor of mankind. Perhaps of all his brothers, Corvus maybe sees a small glimpse of the man, the true man, underneath the incredible power that is the Emperor. The initial discussions with his father is awkward, a detail that's not been shown with many of the other Primarchs, showing that perhaps the Emperor himself was unsure about how this meeting was going to go. But as soon as the Emperor mentions that Corvus has brothers, Corvus is immediately latching onto it, because he, like many of the others, desires one thing: to be amongst equals, to have someone who can relate to him and not just see him as a savior, but as Corvus the person. But there is a shadow that hangs over this joyous reunion, the fact that clearly two of his brothers are no longer in the picture. Something that is almost completely unique to the meeting of Corvus. It's never even discussed with the other Primarchs, but this may be because Corvus is just found so late in the Great Crusade. The Emperor, unlike with many other Primarchs, does not immediately swoop Corvus away, send him straight into training. He wishes to test him. He says he has been watching his life, but he wishes to see how he will finish this war he has started between the moon and the planet below. Perhaps there is an indication that the Emperor feels there is a naivety to Corvus, or in the wake of these two failed Primarchs, the Emperor is more cautious of these sons of his. Perhaps he needs to test them more before bringing them into the fold. These three Primarchs, I believe, have the most positive interactions with the Emperor. It's a side where they get to see that he is definitely the master of mankind. He is the head of a growing state and empire, but yet it shows that he is trying to be a father in these moments. He actually even smiles at them for when they feel joy, for when they wish to have interactions with brothers. They clearly need something from him, which is a role that is a fatherly figure, and he understands this within these three particularly. Once more Perturabo climbed. His life up to this point faded into inconsequentiality. His works of art and science, his time at Locos, his conquests of most of Olympia, they all seemed unimportant. They were activities undertaken to while away a long vigil, until this sole matter of importance could be addressed. Finally, after years of waiting, his father had come. Perturabo climbed hand over hand, rapidly and without due care, ripping his skin on the raised rocks of Mount Telenus. Its pristine snows, untouched by human tread, gleamed above, but they could not outshine the figure that stood at the top of the cliff. Perturabo stared into his brilliance, weeping for the glory. His tears froze upon his skin, coating them in ice that cracked when his cheeks moved. "Father," he cried. The glowing figure said nothing, but awaited him silently below the peak of the mountain, though his view should have been obscured by the overhanging crags of the unclimbable peak. Perturabo could see his father, no matter where he was. He did not care how he could see his father. He was certain it was him, more certain than he had been on anything in his life. From the moment the lights came down from the sky 2 nights ago and settled upon Telephus, he was sure that his true maker had arrived. Others said the black judges had come for their tithe, or that the gods had returned to judge the world. But Perturabo knew with unshakable certainty who it was. Father. He had left the palace at Locos the same day, without provisions, and had taken an aircraft for Telephus. There was nowhere for the light flitter to land, so he crashed it down at the base of the towering mountain and set out on foot, through terraced fields, then sparse forests, onto the prickly meadows that grew around the tree line, and finally on to bare rock. Almost 8,000 meters, and he had not stopped. He looked upwards. The star maelstrom was gone. For the first time, Perturabo was free of its scrutiny. He was not at peace, not yet. His heart thundered with nervous energy. His mind crowded itself with 100 different possible outcomes of this meeting. Anxiety turned most of them bad. He feared he would not be recognized, or that he would be deemed unworthy, or that he would find his father cruel, or that he had been wrong, and it was not his father after all. Positive possibilities dwindled under the weight of his paranoia, inherent to him but honed by years of life among the Olympians. He had lost count of how many plots he had foiled against his life. There was a chance this miracle was but the latest. He needed to know. His need to know sped him on. Infused with a frantic, almost destructive energy, he climbed at a speed that would have burst a mortal heart, passing far into the air that would have starved the lungs of a normal human being. Telephus was so high that altitude sickness and lack of oxygen afflicted even him. and he ascended in a state close to delirium. Taunted by mocking words of unseen beings, he reached a broad ledge. Behind him, all of Olympia spread out. The lesser mountains, like sycophants, crowded around the majesty of Mount Telephus. Sparing no look for the view, he ran across the loose rock of the edge, imprinting it for the first time with human footprints. A cliff of ice reared up ahead. Without stopping, he scrambled upwards, his clawed hands punching holes into the rock face where no handhold existed. The cold burned his flesh. His fingers became numb, like tools of raw iron isolated from his body. He used them to haul himself upwards. His breath seared his lungs. His limbs trembled with lactic acid buildup. Even his marvelous body could not purge. Colored dots danced across his eyes. He reached upwards, throwing his weight after his hand by pushing hard with his feet. He had been climbing too fast and too dangerously, also he might fulfill his need to see his father. This time, his fingers found nothing to grab onto, and he overbalanced. With an incoherent shout, Perturabo fell backwards, finally defeated. But he did not fall. An armored hand grabbed his wrist, and though it was a hand of standard human size, not gargantuan like his own, a great strength was hidden within it. Perturabo looked up, straight into the face of the shining figure. He cried out in fear and wonder. His mind was laid bare, a presence as crushing as the collapse of a mountain bore down on him. The light faded. Perturabo was standing upon solid ice, over 9,000 meters in the sky, where the air thinned to blackness and stars shone all day long. The man's face, previously hidden by the light of his majesty, cleared. Features emerged from the radiance, until Perturabo saw his body and face clearly. A man, mighty and godlike in power, but a man for all that stood before him. His smile was broad in a flawless face. "My son," he said. His lips remained in that sincere expression of pleasure, the like of which Perturabo had never seen on the calculating faces of the Olympians. No words passed his lips, but still he spoke. "I have found you." Perturabo swayed. The pressure of his father's mind was immense. The much-feared star maelstrom was nothing compared to this power. Perturabo's deepest thoughts were dragged out into the light of his soul, and read as easily as words on paper. He looked down on the man, then fell to his knees with all humility, a quality in which until this moment he had not known in himself. "Father," kneeling. Perturabo was still taller than the man, but he was left in no doubt that this strange visitor surpassed him in every way. "I am the Emperor of Terror, and all of mankind," said the man, now speaking aloud. His voice was calm and full of the promise of greater things. "You are Perturabo." I am, said Perturabo. "You know me." The Emperor laid a hand on his shoulder. Warriors in tall helms and golden armor were arrayed behind the Emperor. They watched him closely. "You are as dauntless as I intended you to be." The Emperor looked out over the world, as if he could see the smallest detail from their lofty vantage. "You have achieved much." His smile broadened with delight. "I see a world of peace, filled with mighty castles and marvelous devices. We have much to talk of, and I can teach you a great deal. I sense the hunger in you for knowledge. I think you and I have many nights of discussion ahead of us." "Yes," said Perturabo. "Please." He was struck near dumb by wonder. "Will you offer me your allegiance? Will you join with me and pledge yourself to humanity's service?" The warriors in gold tensed, their weapons pointed at Perturabo. Ordinarily this insult would have sent him into a towering rage, but Perturabo's arrogance, until then immutable as iron, melted and was swept away as he answered meekly, "I want nothing more. I swear I shall serve you faithfully for all time. This I pledge." The Emperor looked at him with an expression of infinite wisdom. Deep in his eyes, sorrow lurked. Perturabo wished more than anything to banish that sadness if he could. "Then rise, my son." The sadness was hidden away again, so that Perturabo doubted he'd ever seen it, and was ashamed he could impute such an emotion on so perfect a being. "Your road will be hard, but few are worthy of it," said the Emperor. "I have many tasks for you, the indefatigable, the indomitable, the unrelenting. You shall be my Lord of Iron." Perturabo cried out in unabashed joy. Finally, he felt acceptance without caveat. Love radiated from the Emperor for his found son. Perturabo basked in it. For the first time, he felt a sense of true belonging. "And may it forever be so," said Perturabo. Perhaps the most incredible moment in Perturabo's life. He finally meets his creator. After years of a life where he had no answers to the burning questions in his mind, he always knew that he was different. He was the lion among sheep. Even when he first arrived on Olympia, and he didn't even know language, he knew he was different from mortal men. But now he's in a strange position. He's no longer the most singular, strongest being in the room. All of Perturabo's life, he has been used. He has been taken in by the tyrant of Logos, used for his mind to create engines of war. Perturabo fought a tyrant empire for his adopted father, but yet he only wished to build and create things of art. He was paraded around the courts of Olympia, always a thing, a tool in the corner, a weapon for the arsenal of the tyrant, something that would bring him misery, pain, and danger at every corner. But now he meets his father, and for the first time he makes his own choice to serve. He chooses to put his loyalty, his trust into a being that far surpasses himself. He sees the arrival of the Emperor as a form of salvation, and so he gives his oath without question, something that immediately makes the Emperor pleased, and even the guards around him, who clearly show that perhaps this meeting has not always gone to plan in other Primarch interactions. The Emperor clearly states to Perturabo that there is something special about him, that he knows Perturabo is filled with knowledge and he is a tool that he's happily going to be using for a great purpose, which is the reconquest of the galaxy.